Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello and welcome to Home Education Matters, and I'm very excited today because I'm joined by longtime home educator Emma White, who is also the mastermind behind Mark My Papers, which is a very inspirational and a sort of leading company within the home education sector. And we're going to be talking about how to support your child if they want to apply to the very top tier universities. So this is Oxbridge, Russell Group, which is a term I really dislike, but we will get to, I'm sure, in our conversation, or any of the kind of top tier universities. So today, Emma and I will be having a chat about if your child does want to apply to these very kind of prestigious organizations, how to help them prepare, what sort of thing to help them get used to. So Emma, thank you so much for joining me today, and do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I came to home education like so many other people, really, through what went wrong, really, rather than what went right. And that was back in 2015. And home education became the best choice for my two younger sons, who at the time were going into year 7 and year 5. So looking back, that was a good thing because I had plenty of time before GCSEs to get it right, as best I could get it right. I have no teaching experience whatsoever other than with horses. And funnily enough, I applied many of the equestrian ways of teaching a horse to teaching the children, and it was incredibly effective. But that's another very, very long story, but it does work.
We actually have a podcast series at the moment about how dog behaviorism and dog training applies to parenting. And actually, there is so much crossover between a lot of this animal behavior and child behavior.
Absolutely. If you apply the same methods as teaching show jumping ponies, that's bizarre, it works. It really does. It's all about getting their buy-in, getting them on side and reading what their sixth sense for understanding them, rather than what they say. It's what you feel. And it's very powerful. So yes, because if a horse doesn't want to do it, you have absolutely no way of persuading it.
Like
yes,
a teenager.
A very long story. Yes, like a teenager. So we started off and I had no idea how good they were because at the very beginning, I'd say we had managed to not get into several schools. The youngest, when the time came, actually failed his 11 plus. So I'm explaining this because I want it to be clear that they were not geniuses. This is a child who failed the 11 plus and then at 16 came in the top 8% for his NSAA and got a place at Cambridge. I think that says quite a lot really about the 11 plus more than him. So we had a remarkable and enjoyable journey from 2015. And now they're both at university, both at Cambridge. The older one, history and modern languages, and the younger one, natural sciences. So you couldn't have a broader spread of subjects. Interesting, they're both very, very different to teach. And the younger one, when he was at the school, I was quite aware that he struggled. And I'm just sort of encouraged him along. But he couldn't read or write at 7. He did really struggle with it. And I was reading a book, I can't remember the name, Norman Deutsch, I think it is, who'd written a book called The Brain That Changes Itself, which is about stroke victims. And one of the interesting things was teaching people to read after a stroke through tracing. So he loved Star Wars. So I said to his teacher at the time, who's very, very good, and we just trace instead of reading. Please don't keep pushing him to read because he's just not getting it, and he really couldn't do it. So there was no point. He'd just learn to hate it and feel and be aware he was getting left behind. So we traced every Star Wars character every night, and he got really into tracing Star Wars characters and really loved it. So then about a month later, we picked up reading again, and he could do it. Now you could say he would have done it anyway. We will never know. But he progressed and progressed, and I used to say to him, you have to read for 20 minutes every night while I'm cooking. You're not allowed out of my sight. You will read in front of me. And he became the most committed, brilliant reader I've ever come across. This is someone who went on to read 38 Shakespeare plays. He's read the Bible. Not that I would recommend him go and read the Bible. That was his choice because it's referred to in so many other parts of literature. And somehow I managed to create a love of learning that I can't understand exactly how. These were two kids who, like I say, failed to get into some very well-known schools, failed 11 plus, and then suddenly we were running with it, with somebody who has no teaching experience, no specialized knowledge. We had no laptops, we had no iPad, we had virtually no internet, because at the time we moved to the south of France, we were living very rurally. And ironically, it was the best thing. There was no distractions. They got really into their reading, into to what we did. And it wasn't as if it was school. It bled into every facet of our life. We would be discussing what we were learning, and we were all really enjoying it. And from that enjoyment, they kept finding a bit more, doing a bit more. So I can't say, I think some people I talk to wrongly think I took them out of school because I thought they were cleverer than everyone else. And I'm very ambitious. So, yes, you're going to go to Cambridge. It wasn't at all like that. We just made it up on the hoof. It put a lot of work into finding out what we needed to do. So behind them, I was like a big engine pushing them, but they were unaware of it, making sure we did it as best we could. And there was absolutely no limit to how far they could go. And yes, you could say, yes, a good school would have achieved the same. But what really hit me last year, Ozzy, the older one, was doing history and modern languages at Christ in Cambridge, and he chose French. He speaks French anyhow. He grew up a lot of his time in France. He loved French literature. And when he got to do the course, he said, actually, I can speak French, and I'd rather use my time for something else. So he chose Hindi because during lockdown we'd watched lots of Bollywood films, and he just said, "I'm going to teach myself." There was no, oh, how am I going to do it? What am I going to do? I'm going to teach myself. So he went to speak to the postgrad department, and they said, "Well, you can join our Hindi course." And he's just come back from a month in India at the university's expense, studying the French influence on India. And I thought that what's remarkable here is he utterly led himself. He didn't need anybody to say, stand in front of him and teach him. He has the wherewithal from home education to say, right, I'm going to do it. Absolutely no negativity, no, oh, I don't think I can, or how difficult it's going to be. Just, I'm going to make it happen. And I think that's one of the most huge upsides. So yes, we aimed for the top, but only because it became apparent that they were capable. I would have been equally happy at the beginning. I mean, to be honest, I didn't know how we would do, how many GCSEs they would achieve. Eventually, we ended up with 18 GCSEs between them, 15 A stars and 3 A's, and 8 A levels, all A star. So
all self-studied at home.
All self-studied, no teaching. Obviously, they had the marking company to help them, but Ernie in his A-levels got over 90% on every paper. And I think that's really good, considering he did, I always remind myself, he did fail the 11 plus, because people always say, oh, we'd have got that anyway. No, he wouldn't, because he would have lost his confidence. It's not about, and nothing is about ability. It's all about attitude and confidence. That can take you far beyond anything academically, if you believe in yourself and you enjoy it. And we all got on side. We all looked at it as a very positive experience. I personally, there were subjects I didn't like at school, but I never let that bleed into what they were doing. I never said, oh God, I hated maths, or I couldn't do this, or I couldn't do that. It was all, let's go for this. We're going to really find something out. We made it all relevant to modern day life as well. So when they were saying to me, I say for English language, and we were looking at the difference between explicit and inferred meaning, and they said, well, I'm never going to do this in life. And I said, yes, you are. If you're a solicitor, you're going to read a statement and you're going to be trying to find every inferred meaning in there. Oh, right, okay. so they could then understand the relevance of everything we did. And I think that's one of the benefits of being an adult, going back to your GCSEs. It suddenly all makes sense that you're doing 11 different subjects. It's covering, history, geography, science. It makes up the whole world where we live. It's everything. And you suddenly think, oh God, yeah, I wish someone had pointed that out to me when I was 14. So yeah, it's been a great journey. I've really enjoyed it. But just my one regret is if I'd had the hindsight to know that we would have a good outcome, because as a mother, I'm sure you found it yourself, Eleanor, you've always got it in the back of your mind. Can I do this? Can I deliver for them all the opportunities they would have had if they'd been at a good school? And yes, we did. We managed to keep as many doors open as possible, and that was always my intention. So
you mentioned that you're not really sure kind of how you created the success, in your family, but you've also mentioned, the importance of autonomy and them taking control of their learning, making it relevant, and how important attitude and confidence are. And I also get the impression there was a certain amount of modeling, in that you would sort of, you would be reading, they would be reading, you would be working, they would be working, that kind of thing. So would you say that they are the cornerstones of how you achieve that kind of learning success in your house?
You've got to keep it enjoyable. And they knew I was there. They would say to me, I remember Ozzy, because he was a little bit older and he clearly realised I didn't know what I was doing. He said to me, are we going to be, are we going to get, because he's always been quite a stressful person. Because I remember when he was at school, he was always worried about how well he was doing or this. And I said, 100% Ozzy, I absolutely don't know what I'm doing, but I will find out and I will make sure we're okay. You've got to get on side with me. We're going to do this as a team. I had a table, Ernie on my left and Ozzy on my right. They're 2.5 years apart, not 200 years apart. That would have been difficult. But some lessons we did together. And obviously 2 years apart at school is quite a big difference. Ernie gradually caught up to the point where they were sitting exams at the same time. So for geography, for example, Ernie was 12, Ozzy was 14 when we did that. So yes, it was all about encouragement and support. And I was like the bedrock of it. I have to say, I've read every GCSE text. I read all 11 textbooks we had and reviewed. I read every word of it. I read every specification. I would be up till sort of 3 o'clock at night. I love reading anyway. And I think that, yes, you're right with modelling. And in the summer, a bit old fashioned, but we'd all sit down together and have a break and read for an hour and have a cup of tea. And everything was done without that sort of the stress of school. It was all, if you want a cup of tea, get one. If you want a piece of toast, get one. It was part of life. There was none of this sort of rigidity of school. I did keep our lessons to half an hour each because I knew I'd never get through the whole day because I could talk for England and we just, everything would merge into one. So I had to keep on top of that. But everything about it was positive. And I think, yes, it's modelling. They learned to be positive too, to feel that they could come up with a solution. And Ernie said to me, they're both working in Cambridge over the summer. I went there last weekend, and Ernie said to me, the one thing I miss about home education is teaching myself. So I find it easier to self-teach. I don't read, I can find all this information out, and I've got some brilliant lecturers, but I miss the self-teaching. I thought that was really good. Because so often I get letters from kids and they'll say to me, oh, it's very unfair for me. I don't have any teacher. My teacher's been off for 2 weeks or this. And I think you're mentally conditioned to be utterly reliant on a teacher. You have a brain, you have a book, you use your initiative, find your way a bit. It's easy to say that because I was like guiding them, keeping them, they could rely on me to make sure I would do all the homework and make the right decisions. And I remember with COVID, the exam entries were so complicated because we didn't know whether they were going to go ahead or not. So I had 2 centres in France where we'd entered and 2 in England. We didn't know where we'd be. We'd got Brexit coming up. It was a real juggling act. and I couldn't let them fall through a gap anywhere. So we had to really sort of think and detail. So a lot of it comes down to very detailed planning on the part of the parent, and giving them 100% positive ride as somebody learning something. Luckily, they left school before they picked up on too much negativity or too much, I can't do that. I don't think you can ever let them fail. I know life's full of things we get wrong and we fail. One of the good things about home education, you can do everything at the right time when they're ready. So, for example, we did geography. We found the easiest one to do soonest, and probably because they were most interested. We'd watched the Alan Titchmarsh series, The British Eye is a Billion Years or 3 billion years in the making, and they were so into that led them into physical geography. So they were both ready to do it very early. History, on the other hand, the EdXL history specification took 3 years.
History
we
did
enjoy it.
Biggest syllabus.
I absolutely enjoy it, but it is massive. Interestingly, the A-level only took us 2 years, so you can see that EdXL GCS history is a whopper. It really is, and it's great, and it's really interesting. But I was no way going to enter the exam until they were absolutely ready for that.
When it comes to autonomy, a lot of the assumptions around creating a child that is very autonomous in their learning, and like you said about your son who goes to Cambridge and misses that self-studying, a lot of the assumption, I think, in the home ed community is that is created when you unschool. But I don't get the impression that you had an unschooling approach. I know from my personal perspective, I'm not an unschooler. I'm reasonably structured, actually. And yet my son is also very self-studies everything, like it very similar to your son with Hindi. My son did German for GCSE, which was a big mistake on my part, actually, because he just loved the language. And I said, well, why not do a GCSE in it? And 3 years late, well, actually, a year and a half later, he was absolutely sick to death of the language. He didn't want to go anywhere near German again. But then 6 months later, he started teaching himself French just because he felt like it. And he just, and yet we've had a very structured approach. And this idea that creating an autonomous learner is very much embedded in unschooling. But for you, it wasn't necessarily an unschooling approach you took, I'm guessing.
No, we didn't. We had a very methodical approach. But I think it depends on your experiences of school, not only as a parent, but as a child. If you've had a negative experience of school, you probably think unschooling is the way to undo it all. We hadn't had a negative experience. They'd been at a very good primary school. Things just went wrong in our personal life, and this became the best solution. So they enjoyed school. They missed a lot of the social aspects of it at first, and I had to work hard to create new friendships and new clubs and everything for them. So I don't think you have to unschool to get that autonomy. That came through constantly being positive, saying it was enjoyable. So, we can't turn away from education, because all the subjects you learn make up the fabric of everything in life. Everything is science, everything is geography, everything is history. You need English to communicate. You need maths. You need all these skills. And they're all delivered through these exams we do. I know there's I meet home educators who convince themselves that a walk around the park is geography, that going into a shop and buying a cake is maths. You could argue it is, but if you want to go that bit further and have career doors open, then you have to, like it or not, exam qualifications, public exam qualifications are the tickets to conventional careers. You have to go to university to become a lawyer or an accountant. So we kept it very, very positive, and it was all about encouragement and support. So we went with what, if they found something interesting, yes, we would look into it, but we were mainly working towards GCSEs.
So in lots of ways, you opened up the doors for your children to go to Cambridge, for example, because at a very early stage in the process, you had your eye on that you need to do GCSEs, you need to get good GCSEs, you need to do A-levels, you need to get good A-levels, and then you can apply to university. So you were kind of working back from that yourself as a parent.
Well, I didn't for a minute think they'd be good enough to get into Cambridge. They'd certainly not shown any inclinations at school that they were of that level at all, because I think it's all sort of cast in stone with schools very early on, far too early on, of who's going to pass 11+, who's going to apply for Oxbridge. It's nonsense. it's all down to attitude. It's not down to ability. If a child really wants to do it, they can. They, you can encourage them to really push a bit further. And if someone is genuinely interested, you get kids who are phenomenally interested in football because they enjoy it, and maybe their father or mother enjoys it. But you can then apply that to science, to other subjects, and get that same buy-in. And that's all I did. Ernie got really interested in astronomy. He had me out there at night in the dark. Luckily, the south of France is very good for stars. So we were out there and we did the GCSE in astronomy. And he still remembers it. He absolutely was really, really interested in it. And he got me interested in it. I've been basically interested in it due to my father when I was a kid, but I think it's all about a positive mindset. I don't think you need to enter school to get that autonomy. When I talk to the boys, they are very capable, which is brilliant, of choosing what they're going to learn next. Because Ozzy, interestingly, he's working in Cambridge for the summer. Then he's got a place with a law firm, and there was 2,000 applicants for 60 places, this Magic Circle law firm. And obviously he's not studying law, but he said, I'll come back. And I said, well, how are you going to go on a course? He said, no, I'll just learn that. I'll do that in my back pocket whilst I'm doing my MPhil in history. And that, I thought, well, that's interesting. Most people would not do that. He would just say, well, I can do it. It's huge self-belief that's come from constantly saying to them, you find it out. We have all these books. We had the very old-fashioned approach because we didn't have the internet. We're going to have to make notes. And that worked twofold. It made them very, very fast writers. So we've never had an exam where they didn't finish with many, many minutes to spare. They understood that there was a real big buy-in that they were going to have to read and find to take a bit of control of their learning. I did my last lesson with Ernie. I remember we did the last one to finish was the EdXLI GCSE English Literature. I did the poems with him summer 2019, and then he'd already started, though he was only 14 at the time, he'd started his A-levels in 3 sciences. And I said, I think you can manage with those on your own, can't you? You don't need me. And he said, yes, I'm fine. So he would just tell me each week where you're up to. By now I was working with the business. It's really taking my time up. And he did it. He just ran with it. So
you were there for check-ins almost to make sure.
Oh yeah, and then to check in. By 14, a home-educated child should be able to self-teach. You're there with them all the time, saying, how are we going to find this out? How are we going to find that? And it was all about analysis and evaluation. And that's what I think was really good, discussing it with them. What do you think of that? At school, a lot of children won't give their opinion because they're probably not very confident in front of 30 other children. We get some really good debates going on, everything from the Weimar Republic to the reigns of King John and King Richard, constantly debating everything. Making it really I thought it was interesting, and they clearly did too. I had a very funny incident. She was talking about my uncle, his wife leaving him, and I said, oh, Richard's wife left him. And Ernie said, no, she didn't. He was married to Berengaria. Thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Richard the First. I never left him. He said, no, I'm talking about Uncle Richard, Ernie, today, funnily enough. This isn't history. This is us. This is life in Leicester. So get with it. But what is they immediately, it was all part of what we did. They didn't sort of leave their schooling behind and then, right, we're now out of schooling mode. It was with us all.
I think discussion-based learning is so important. I think this idea that whatever they're learning about, you then talk about as a family. And I find that particularly things like history, but also books that they've read, science, for example, my son is very big on science. I'm rubbish at science, so I get him to kind of explain it. Then we have a good laugh at how useless I am, and then I ask him questions. And
that's a really good thing, Eleanor, because I'd say my Ernie was much better at science than Ozzy and I. And he explained things back to us, which gave him huge confidence. I remember discussing Brownian motion and having a bit of a laugh about it, and said, "You need to take this seriously because one day you'll be at a dinner party," which they found hilarious, and somebody will mention Brownian motion, and you need to know what it is. And amazingly, a couple of years ago, we met one of our friends from Pony Showdown from years ago, and he did mention Brownian motion. And as he said, "Did you tell him to mention that?" And I said, "No, I didn't. He actually just happened to mention Brownian motion." So as it all became, Ernie, you explain it to us then, you tell us what it is. So he grew confidence, and that was his little bit of authority. "Oh, I know this. I know more about it than you do, Mum," which is great. So I think sometimes actually not knowing as a parent is an advantage, because you can let them lead you and gain that confidence. Schools are full of teachers who know more than their kids. That's obvious, that's the right thing. But it conversely works brilliantly the other way around, when a child has a bigger interest and knowledge than the parent and gains a bit of kudos for being able to tell you what they've learned.
I think also when it comes to, you mentioned about that home educated children by the age of 14 should be kind of organizing their own workload.
Yes.
And I know that when my son was 11, we were on holiday in Cornwall, and I said to him, "Okay, this is when you would actually be going into secondary school now. So from now on, I expect you to organize your own workload." And he did that, and he's been doing it ever since. My daughter, who is 15, I didn't do this with. I made an assumption that she wouldn't be able to organize her own workload because she's a different kind of person. Yes. And so it got to about 6 months ago, and we decided we were going to go the high school diploma route alongside GCSEs, because much like you, I feel that my job is to like belts and braces for everything. Like, so I have like contingency plans for everything. So yes. She's doing GCSEs and she's doing the high school diploma route. And part of the high school diploma route was that she needed to organize her own work. And I was quite nervous of this, because I thought, you know what, if I say to her, you decide, these are the things you need to do this week. These are the subjects, history, English, etc. And I thought, if I just say to her, "Okay, you plan your lessons," she just won't do them. I thought she's just not going to do them. So, but I thought, well, look, this is part of the high school diploma, at least with the kind of umbrella company we're using, that they have to show that they're organizing their work. So I said to her, okay, I got her a folder, and I said, these are the templates you need to, every week you need to fill this out, say what you're doing. And then at the end of the week, you need to evaluate it and see, how you went. And so she was 14 or something, and I thought, she's not ready for this, she is not ready for this, and it's going to be a disaster. And she was brilliant at it, and she's really autonomous now. And I thought, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I trust her to do this sort of 2 years ago? And a lot of it is that you kind of don't want them to do badly at it, so you don't kind of take away that safety net, but actually you do kind of need to trust that if you allow them that freedom and autonomy, they will step into the responsibility you're giving them.
It's a very gradual process. They sort of just morphed into being very, very in control of their own studies. Ernie was 14, Ozzy would have been 16, but I think it depends on what age you start. So Ernie had been doing it since year 5, and we'd got the sort of methods together. There was a lot of, so the discussion, the reading, the taking notes, they realised, I made it very clear to them at the start, there are no quick fixes here. There's no magic pixie that will make you know all this. You are going to spend a lot of time revising. We don't have ed tech that can, with a projector, with this, with that. We don't have a photocopier. It's old fashioned. But really, I know ed tech's meant to make shortcuts to a good result, but to be able to get into Cambridge at 16, I think that is an incredibly shortcut, all through doing it the long way round. It's quite ironic that we got to the final date at 16, and he'd actually covered the content for 6 A-levels, but I only entered 4. But then he did start when he was young, because he'd started his A-levels at 14. We entered physics, chemistry, maths, and biology. Those 4. He'd also done further maths, and he'd also done English literature. And the reason I kept up English literature, I wanted him to keep up his evaluation skills and his analysis skills. So we'd read all these books. He then started outpacing me, reading more than me, but we would take a book, say Never Let Me Go or Frankenstein, and then we'd discuss them and analyse and evaluate. And I would get him to write essays, even though I never intended to enter him in the exam, and we'd get them marked. And I thought that was quite a good skill for him, because as he'd gone into science at 14, I didn't want him to lose his writing skills.
So that's actually leads me on to my next question, which is that we've spent the first half of this podcast talking about mindset and talking about how important it is, confidence and attitude and the values within the house, modeling, making it enjoyable, making it relevant. So what about the actual sort of nitty-gritty about what to study and how to study? Because like you, my son is doing 4 A levels. He wants to do science, and he's sitting history as his 4th A level purely because, a bit like you, he actually really enjoys it, but it's that sense of keeping up his evaluative skills and his writing skills. However, I know that most universities, from what I can tell, don't want 4 A levels. They want 3 A levels. So let's talk a little bit about planning the amount of subjects you do and what subjects you do. So let's start at GCSEs. Is there a golden number, which is what the minimum you want, or the maximum, or anything like that?
It's quite interesting, because every website will tell you there's 5. You need 5. That's because they have to be seen to be inclusive. But that is the minimum number. You will be up against people who have 12. So I would go for 9. That's a good number. Most kids in school are doing 9 or 10. I would also try to keep it to the facilitator. It depends what you're aiming at. If you want to do animal care at your local tertiary college, you're not going to need all these bells and whistles. If you want to go to Russell Group University or Oxbridge, you have to be very focused on the facilitating subjects. So they're English literature, history, geography, the 3 sciences, and the modern languages. You really need 2 of those. Yes, you only need 3 A levels, but Ernie's thinking, Ozzy did French, history, geography, and he also did politics, but we stopped after an AS. But they all supported each other. They were a good mix. He was applying for history and modern languages, so he needed history, and he obviously needed a modern language. Geography is a good facilitating subject. It also works well with politics, the human geography side of it.
Is this A level you're talking?
This is a day level. This is a day level. At GCSE, I insisted with them that they did 2 sciences. So they had to do a minimum of 2 sciences. They had to do English language and English literature, and obviously maths. We chose 11 subjects, and they had to choose 9 from it. So the 11 we chose, English language, English literature, maths, history, geography, French, physics, chemistry, biology, psychology, and astronomy. That's what I was prepared to cover myself, and they had to choose 9 each. So Ozzy chose French and psychology, where Ernie chose chemistry and astronomy. So that kept me on my toes, constantly researching and coming up with how we were going to do it.
And you spread those out over a number of years?
Well, for Ozzy, that was over 2 years, years 10 and year 11. Ernie started years 8, 9, and 10. He'd finished by year 10. Again, he's obviously very, very capable, but he was pulled uphill by having an older brother. And from a time point of view, as soon as he could be weaned off Key Stage 3 onto a GCSE, we did cover all of Key Stage 3, but I pulled him forward. I said to him, I remember with biology, I said, it would really help me, Ernie, because I don't really have time to do this twice every day. Please just see if you can do some of these lessons. And after a couple of weeks, he was absolutely fine. 6 months later, he was miles ahead of all of us. So
was this textbooks that you were using? So, for example, Key Stage 3 and GCSE textbooks.
I just bought the textbooks. So we did buy some secondhand, but you do have to be really careful, because we were at the stage where the old legacy subjects were changing from 9 to 1, and I made the mistake of buying the old legacy geography book. And then when I realised this was the one big mistake I made, I said to Ernie, we've got a problem here, Ernie, because we're learning from the old textbook. The exam is in 8 months' time. If you don't do it, we're going to have to get the new textbook and we'll start through it, because it's quite hard when they overlap. They changed it from 1 3-hour paper to 2 3-hour papers. And I said to him, you're quite happy doing 3, 4, 5 hours of Lego without looking up. Why don't we try and do geography? So he's 12, and he said he'd have a go. And he did have a go on the exam. he finished it in about 2 hours, and he spent most of the time looking around like this. And Ozzy said to him after, well, you're just annoying people. Just focus on what you do. Ridiculous in that exam room. And then in the car on the way back, what was really odd, he remembered every single question word for word. And I thought, God, that's quite unusual that you remember them. And then weeks later, you could still remember them. He's quite bizarre like that. So he did them in years 8, 9, and 10. 9 GCSEs spread over 3 years. Then he did his A levels a year early, did 4 A levels a year early. But we had from year 9 to start on the 3 sciences at A level.
So for GCSEs, how they did 9 each over 2 or 3 years. So how many, I know the reason I'm asking this is because I know people will be listening and want to know the answer to this. So how many hours a week approximately did they do for these kind of, for studying?
Well, my basis for teaching them is they do 2 hours a day in Key Stage 2, 3 hours a day in Key Stage 3, and 4 hours a day in Key Stage 4. And I broke that down into half-an-hour lessons. If they wanted to do
7 days a week.
No, only 5 days a week. We've had school holidays too.
Okay.
But you see, I think it's really difficult. Like I said, geography was 8 months. History was 3 years. You don't know how. When people say, how long do you think it'll take me? You've no idea. And that's one of the hardest things as a home educator, and also one of the best things. You don't know. You may have a child who absolutely races through maths and can do it in 6 months. Another child may take 4 years. So just enter when they're ready. Now, I did really rush him through geography. He was capable and he did get an A. So you can't, he's 12, fine, got an A. Well done. He always says to me, oh, Mum, if you just waited another year, I would have done the new one and got a 9, because he got 9s in everything else. And I said, yeah, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Only an A is more than good enough. So be satisfied. But I don't think you can actually say how long it will take. We broke it down. We did 8 half-hour lessons a day by Key Stage 4. Now, Key Stage 5, they are probably doing the same, but a bit more. And homework. So say for example, I was teaching Aussie French. Ernie would be revising astronomy. So you've got to do half an hour of revision on it. And that way where the revision was embedded in the timetable worked really effectively for us. Because I say to them, I don't actually believe in homework. And I remember when they were little in at school, homework was really more of a job for me. They come in, they have to make a summer garden. Well, they weren't going to do that at age 6. That was my job. So homework to me should only ever be revision. Just learn what we've done, and then we can move on to the next thing. But you need to know, have it embedded in your mind on your hard drive that you understand what we've done.
So when it came to preparing for exams, they would choose their subjects, and then you would say, okay, you'll be sitting 3 or 4 this year. And then you would give them the textbook. You would say, okay, you've got like 7 months to do the subject, or 2 years to do the subject, or whichever. And then you would say, okay, and you need 2 months before the exam for revision.
We didn't really, I had no idea how long it was going to take to start. With GCSEs, I was there for every single word of it. They only became autonomous when they started their A levels. But you have to remember that Ernie started his age 14. So he was on his own by age 14. Ozzy was on his own by 16. For Ozzy, because he's a very different kettle of fish teaching Ozzy and much more stressful, I did his first 6 weeks of A levels in history and politics with him. And the reason I did that, I wanted to get his first essays marked and make sure he got an A or an A star. I didn't want him to get a C or a B, and because he would think that was failure. He would think, panic, panic, panic. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So I worked with him. We broke every essay down into a nuanced, good, decent response. So saying, if you let a kid just go from GCSE to A level on their own, they can sometimes, if it's a humanities subject, they can sometimes make a complete disaster of it because they think it's just about regurgitating information and a view that they probably learned from a textbook before. Saying, no, you've got to try and put your own nuanced approach into this. And as soon as he was getting good grades, he could then run with it. But I did have a hand in making sure so that he stayed confident that he got good marks to start with.
So it sounds like the process the process up to A levels was quite time consuming from your perspective, in as much as you sat next to them, you had the textbooks together, you guided them through the textbook.
Absolutely, right through to the end of their GCSEs. So saying that, I very remember clearly doing those last, I think the 16 EdXLI GCSE anthology poems, and I really enjoyed it. We loved doing that. But I said to her, only that's it then now. You don't need me anymore. I'm always there, and I'm there to guide. But he didn't need me. Physics, chemistry, math, biology. He did he did the A levels with me, but that was more of a discussion thing. A level literature. He could. He would say to me, right, well, let's both read Frankenstein. Let's read Never Let Me Go. Trying to think which other ones. He did Handmaid's Tale. He read all of them off the whole specification. I sort of ran out of energy a bit towards the end of that. But that was simply to keep his ability to analyse and evaluate it, which I thought was really, really important. And then when we started looking towards Oxbridge, God, that was a big thing from home, because there's so many little tiny strands that you have to address. You have to do different exams. You have to do the NSAA. Ozzy has had an AS interview history exam, an AS interview French exam. And again, we prepared for all of those. And we did it months in advance. Now, you mentioned earlier about getting a bit of past paper fatigue. Ozzy would never get past paper fatigue. Ozzy could do them every day of his life forever and be loving it. Ernie, when it came to his science papers, we never actually did a biology past paper for paper 3 at A level. He never bothered. He was happy doing less. So you're teaching them each to their strengths.
So when it comes to the A levels, so for GCSEs, you think about 9 and pretty core subjects. So it's kind of similar to the kind of things they would do at school. For example, English Lit, a lot of home educators don't do that, but languages as well. So you would kind of slightly map to the more conventional GCSEs.
Yes, I would. And I was taking the skills from each one. I think literature is really good for analysis and evaluation, and also good for seeing, taking like an inspector course. We got really into it. We watched the other Priestley plays, Dangerous Corner, Time and the Conways. I remember really trying to understand his sort of social and political reasons for writing what he did, sort of really getting under the skin of it. And we'd have huge discussions about it. So I say, if you do want to do law, and interestingly now at the moment, Ozzy does want to do law, it's really good for analysing different approaches, different values, coming up with a different perspective on things. It's only a very basic level. It's GCSE, but it's the beginning. It's the embryonic stage. So is history. So I think you have to think beyond the content. What skills are these subjects bringing to me that I will use in a career? Now, this
or possibly need later, right?
Possibly need later. You don't know what career you're going to have. I mean, Ernie started out going to do medicine. We knew everything about medicine. Then he changed, and he decided he wanted to do biochemistry. He couldn't apply to Cambridge for medicine too young, because I think you have to be 18 legally to study medicine. And at the moment, when I spoke to him last weekend, he said he'd been to Canary Wharf, walked around the Shard, decided he's going to work there. He wants a job now as an investment banker. This may only last a few months, and he's going to teach himself economics. So he's changed at Cambridge to do physics and maths. But he has all those underpinning skills that he learnt in those GCSEs to be able to change his mind. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I think that's
what he can build on, the skills he learnt in analysis, evaluation, understanding, writing to argue, writing to persuade. We've learnt all that. So if he wants to change his mind, that's great. Every door is still open.
That's what I always feel as a home educator, that my job is to open routes for them that they may not want to take, but are opened because of things that we've done together.
That's exactly how I saw it, that they don't know. And you ask a young person what they want to do. When I was 10, I wanted to be a jockey. How ridiculous. Look, how utterly stupid. They will change their minds. Ernie, we've gone from medicine to biochemistry. Now it's investment banking. He will change again, but luckily he's got the foundations of lots of skills. And and he's got the capacity to teach himself to change his mind. And that's what it's always about, keeping options and opportunities open. And I think one of the downsides of home education, partly due to cost, where it is expensive to enter all these exams, you're constantly chopping away at it to say, right, well, we'll just do 5 then, or we'll just do 2. You only need English and maths. Some even say, well, you don't need English and maths because you can go to college at 16 and do it then. You can't. Saying to kids, do it later in life, that's making it their expense, their time. When you're sort of a young adult and you've got your first job and then you think, well, I now need to get some GCSEs. Well, you feel like a bit of a misfit because you're a bit left behind because all your other friends have passed through. So it was always, I felt my responsibility was to equip them for later on in life with the basic skills they need to be able to make their own decisions. And so far they have. I'm happy with whatever choices they make. They're in a good place. They've got loads of opportunities open to them. And we've had to work really hard, though, to keep those doors open. And I think there is a moment, there's this sort of misconception that because you're home educated, and because it's harder for you, and it is harder for you, it's definitely harder for you if you're home educated, that in itself is enough. And you can turn up at these universities with a portfolio or just 5 GCSEs. And
I think that used to be the case, actually, maybe sort of 10, 15 years ago. I'm not sure it's the case anymore.
It's absolutely, I mean, Ernie for Cambridge, because he was doing 4 A-levels, I was thinking, he's young, he clearly interviewed well, he'd come in the top 8% in his NSAA. I thought they'd give him a better contextual offer. The normal offer was 2 A-stars and an A, and he was offered 3 A-stars and an A. And he did it. It's fine. And he
was actually offered a
harder grade, a harder mark, because he was doing 4. They weren't going to let him off on one and just give him an E in one of them. And he said to me, well, to be honest, if I don't get 4 A-stars, I don't think I'd probably keep up anyway. Well, I'm sure he would have done, but I thought, well, that's the right way to look at it, rather than, oh, that's unfair. Why have they made it harder for me? And the same with Ozzy. The normal grade was an A-star and 2 A's for history and modern languages. He had to get 2 A-stars and an A. He had to get an A-star in French.
Was that because they were home educated? Do you think there was a sense they needed to prove themselves?
I think, I don't know. I just think it was at the time of COVID for Ozzy, not for Ernie. Ernie had to sit proper exams. But I think because the grade inflation was so ridiculous, 45% of the country got A-star and A, which basically says 45% of A-level results were good enough for Oxbridge, which we all know is nonsense. They probably raised the bar a bit just to make sure that may be the case. And he did get an A-star. And I know if he'd taken the exam officially, he would have got an A-star then. He was particularly good at French. Should be. He grew up there and he's mad about literature. So the only downside of growing up in foreign countries, you tend to use your more colloquial local language. It's a bit like if I analysed said what I've been speaking to you now, have I used the subjunctive? Have I used the past historic? Have I used the perfect? I haven't got a clue. So I was always saying to him, try and remember your 28 grammar techniques at Aussie and make sure they're fitted. But so yes, they did want an A-star in French from him. They were adamant about that.
So what about applying to Oxford and Cambridge? What are your tips for going about that as a home educating parent?
Right. Well, first of all, I'd start by going to see both of them, because with both, they were both set on Oxford until we visited Cambridge, and then they both thought Cambridge was a nicer place. Be really seriously, you're going to be spending 3 years plus there, so you've got to like the town. You can't not like either of them. They're both fantastic places. Look at as many colleges as you can, but look at the course. The most important thing is to find the course that's right for you, that you are genuinely 100% interested in. It's not about whether you really just want to be in a nice place for 3 years. You have to be really focused on every aspect of the course, every element, to look at what's covered in the 3 years. And when you come to write your personal statement, make sure it addresses those areas of the course that you find interesting.
What about your home education in the personal statement? Is that something that you should be discussing in there?
Yes, it does, but only where it's relevant. It's not like a badge to say, I think you have to deliver it in such a way that it has given you a grist, an understanding, a motivation, an ability to self-study that you probably wouldn't have had. And as a result of this, I have read this book, I've done this, I found this part of the course particularly interesting because of this, which from your home education. So you're blending it in. You're not just making a profound statement, I'm home educated, hark at me, sort of thing. It's got to be blended in to your argument. We spent months on personal statements. I think there's a bit of a tendency to try and say, oh, I'm brilliant and I'll contribute because I'm really good at, I also enjoy netball and I enjoy this, and this. That may work for other universities, but for Oxbridge, they're only interested in your academic ability.
Yeah, I've also heard that, for example, my son was mulling over doing physics at university, and he's currently off in Thailand learning to scuba dive. And I think I mentioned to his physics tutor, I said, oh, that will look good when he's applying for physics. And she says something like, they don't care about anything that isn't to do with physics. They only care about physics. If it's not about physics, they're not interested in it.
Because you're normally applying to 5. Now, Ozzy applied for 5 and he got 5 offers. He did Cambridge, Durham, Bristol, King's and Warwick. And we were aware that the other 4 are probably less bothered. So he did have one closing paragraph, and he cleverly put it that he plays the piano to a very high standard. And when we were in France, he was playing it. He'd go around to soirees and evening. Can Ozzy come and play the piano? And he was invited to play it for the funeral of the director of music, head of music for Sony classical music, German person we knew, which was a real honour to be invited. So I said, well, you can include that because it shows you're of a level, and it was in France. But you wouldn't have mentioned it if it hadn't been because you were in France and you were wanting to study history and French.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He'd also had work experience with a law firm in France and also a law firm in Preston, criminal law firm. And we included those 2. He wasn't applying for law, but he'd said long term he would like to study law. So they therefore became relevant because they are a bragging point, but you have to very cleverly put it in such a way that it applies to why you want to be there, why you've chosen that course, why you've chosen that college.
Are personal statements as important as the grades that you get when it comes to Oxbridge and Russell Group, or do the grades get you to the stage where they're reading your personal statement?
They're both really important, because if it comes to a head-to-head with another student, bear in mind the standard, so there's 5 applicants for every place. If they want a reason not to take you, they'll compare your personal statement and say, well, this one I just slightly prefer. So every single aspect of your application has got to be really, really good. You have to put as much effort into it as if you're doing an A-level or a GCSE. It's not something you suddenly decide like, oh, I'm going to apply for, I don't know, a plot on a caravan site this weekend. Really take months to do it. So your personal statement's got to absolutely nail the reasons you want to go on that course. Do lots of extracurricular reading. I know Ozzy read 28 extra books on politics, history,
and he mentioned those in the personal statement.
He mentioned the relevant ones. He was interested in the big men of history, Hitler, Stalin. He'd read tons on those, and he wanted to be interviewed by a chap called Professor David Reynolds, who he'd read lots of his books. He didn't say, well, I've read your books, but luckily he was interviewed by him. He'd chosen his college. He'd done lots of homework. So none of this is left to chance. If you begin to read through the lines of what I'm saying, we put in tons of work to get it right. We left no one stone unturned. There was a 1 in 5 chance, 4 in 5 chance that they wouldn't get a place. But you can reduce that by, you would be amazed. We help some people who've got in, and you think right from the start, you've not done your homework here. Another one I think you need to be really careful, which home educators do. Cambridge is still, CAIE are still offering the ASA level option. So you'll do an AS in year 12. Unless you're going to get an A, which is the highest grade at AS, don't do it.
You mean the modular yes, one where you split it between the 2 years?
If you get a B, that utterly wipes out your chances. Unless you're pretty certain you're going to get an A, you don't want a B on your application form.
At AS, you mean?
At AS. The rest of the exam boards are no longer doing them. So if you get an A, it's an advantage because you've got half an A level that your competitors haven't got. But if you get a B, that's not good. So I'd say,
even though it shows development, so you went from a B, say, to an A for your second year, they don't like that, no?
well, I think yes, but you won't have your second year results yet. That's the
Oh, I
thing.
see. Because of now, actually, this leads me to my next question because I was actually going to ask you about that because my son, for example, is taking a gap year because he wants to sail around the world, as you do when you're home educated and think you can do
Yeah.
anything you want. And one of the bonuses, I think, is that you have your results when you apply. I'm guessing with your two boys, it sounds like they applied before they had their results.
They
So how
applied
do you go
before.
about that without predicted grades?
Well, because of the exam team, we've got over 300 examiners working with us on my papers. I chose two, and I chose they were both heads of departments at leading schools who had been to Oxford and Cambridge themselves, who knew the exact process. They also knew the speech pattern. There's a way in which they talk in these references that is very different to how you would say it if you didn't know. They knew the speak. They knew the buzzwords, the buttons to press of the admissions team and what they're looking for. Now, any ordinary person, ordinary teacher doesn't know that sort of closet language between them. Say it's still not closet language between them. You just need to explain that this person is top, compares highly with his other cohorts, saying all the things they want to hear. Now, for Ozzy, because he was pre-COVID, I got about 7 references together from the person he did piano with, from the 2 law firms he'd worked with. We've got one for French, we've got one for geography, and I gave them all to one academic referee and said, blend these into what you're doing.
And did the academic referee know him?
Yes, because that's another point. For the last year, he spoke to him once a month as a mentor, discussing, and every time it was like a Cambridge interview, pushing him, testing him, trying to, not teaching him, but challenging him all the time.
To prepare him for the interview and also allow him to be a reference, ultimately.
Yes, so he knew him well. He'd worked with us for a long time. He's a principal examiner with OCR and CAIE. Ozzy was doing CAIE history. Seriously good, Oxford himself, head of sponsor for top school, and really, really good at saying to Ozzy, well, I disagree with you on that point. What about this? And then Ozzy saying, well, actually, it's quite interesting with the exam because with the interview, you may disagree with what they're saying. You're not there to fight an argument. It is fine to change your mind. You may make a statement in your interview and then you feel you've got to defend it, But he taught Ozzy, no, you can change your mind, but make sure you speak your thoughts, show them how you're thinking, show them why you changed this policy. But the same for Ernie. I found one of our examiners, chemistry examiners, studied natural sciences himself at Cambridge, knew the course, recommended how best to approach it for Ernie. So we worked with him again once a month. Ernie would speak to him. So that was a huge advantage in having marked my paper behind him because I could choose from 300 examiners which ones were the best match to help them there. But they didn't have lessons; they just had mentoring.
And can our parents who are listening to this access the same kind of service through your company?
No, we don't offer it because all our examiners are anonymous. We don't offer it to other people, but we work with a company called Uni Admissions now for Cambridge and Oxford, where we hand them over to them because they are particularly good at it. I think that one of the problems for home, they really do need to be aware that it is such a detailed, you've got to be very fastidious to approach. In some ways, I think, Ozzy said to me the other day, I think we over prepared. But what he's actually doing now, and this may be interesting for you, he's JCR president of his college, which is the sort of senior man, they call it, of his college. And he put together a webinar, I don't know if you're aware of it, for home educated applicants to CRICE. And they had 40 people listen. He's going to do some more, which are really good, talking through the whole process and how he found it. He's also writing articles from my papers, blogs on the journey he had from his A-levels to getting into Cambridge and how he found it, and the social side, and adapting to suddenly finding himself at university when he'd been home educated by his mum, and you're either state or private school educated, and he was neither. And actually it's quite funny because he's climb very quickly to the top of the pile. He said, I felt actually quite mature amongst them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I
Because
bet. Yeah.
most of his community was adults. He did have other children who were friends in France, but most of his day-to-day interaction was adults. And he very quickly took control. That sounds awful, doesn't it? That sounds like he's occupied Cambridge. No, he he had the confidence, I think, and people who are not in favour of home education would be astonished at this. For both of them, adapting from home education to university, they've had absolutely no issues with it at all. From being home educated, they both have lots of confidence. Both think they're as good or better than anyone else. Probably got to learn their place a bit there, but that's a good thing, that they don't feel, oh, I don't fit, oh, I'm a fraud. That's been hugely important. But I just say to anyone applying, get on the website, look at every college, put the hours in, attend as many webinars as you can for different colleges, keep revisiting it. Am I doing the right thing? Is this college right for us? Is this course right for us? Are we genuinely interested? Am I really going to be able to put the personal statement together, say that I absolutely live and breathe chemistry? And
I'm guessing the same applies to top universities that aren't Oxbridge. So what we call Russell Group, which I really dislike, but just like top tier universities, I'm guessing the same approach applies. You research the university,
yes,
you look at the course, and then you choose.
I think for everything in home education, my approach, and I think again this comes from producing horses, you have to get everything right to be successful. Right from looking into a GCSE to choosing a university, whether it's a Russell Group one, or even if you're doing animal care at local college, look into it, make sure it's right. You get one life, give it your best shot, put in lots of detail. I think I was regularly up till 3 o'clock at night reading specifications, trying to find the right mix, seeing whether we're going back to GCSEs, was the Cambridge board right for them? Was the EdExcel board right for them? What would fit their strengths?
Yeah, in actual fact, it's one of my kind of bugbears when people sort of attribute my children's success, academic success, to luck or just like, I don't know, natural giftedness. And I really want to say, no, like I spent hours and hours and hours comparing all the specifications, printing them all off and going on to every kind of Google site and every Facebook group to double check and triple check everything. And it's a lot of work as a parent, and you put it in from very early on, don't you?
You put it in, and you have to be meticulous. You have replaced every role at a school: teacher across 11 subjects, you're the exams officer, you're the pastoral care, you're everything. You look at these school websites and they'll have 150, 200 staff. It's all you. And you've got to take them from Key Stage 2 or 3 right through to Cambridge. You are it. So there are no shortcuts. And I always make it clear to the boys, the time will go anyway. If you've got to do it, because I set up this business halfway through, and people say, well, how did you find the time? And I said, well, I get up early and I go to bed late. So I found the time. It's there. The hours are there in the day. Just get on with it.
Yeah. And I completely agree. There is no shortcut for an active parent who plans meticulously,
yes,
and thinks ahead. In actual fact, one of my favorite moments from my son's home education journey so far was he sat his 11th GCSE the summer before this last one, and I got him a cake with two number 11 candles on it.
Wow.
And I lit it, and he blew out the candles, and he plucked one of the number ones off and he gave it to me, and he said, you deserve at least half of the recognition because you've done all the driving, all the planning, all the logistics. And it is so true. It is very much a collaborative effort, isn't it?
And I wish people would realize that before they came into it. I don't think they realise. And people say exactly the same, Eleanor, for me. People say, you're lucky, they were just bright. And I think I worked endlessly to achieve this, and with the business, I worked day and night trying to get it forward. We're now in 35 countries that offer the English curriculum, and we're marking with countless, we're mainly big UK state schools. It's become a huge operation.
Yeah, you've expanded into schools. I know when I first used your business.
They came to
really?
us. and they flocked to us. That was brilliant. We've got this fabulous team of examiners, 300. It's growing all the time. They have to be approved. They have to have marked officially. And they have to be beyond that. They're working with all your. They have to be really committed to it. They're not just saving up for a wedding dress or a wedding cake. They are, on the whole, older people who've marked for examples for 20 plus years, and they get the ethos of what we're trying to do. That we're trying to improve grade, teach welfare, to take the burden of teachers. But just coming back to the point you mentioned as a home education parent, I went to an open at Cambridge and I sat the parents' seminar on what we were going to learn. And the overriding question, it comes up time and time again, and Ernie did an open day the other day at Pembroke College, and he said, it's unbelievable, Mum, the same question comes up time and time again. What's the easiest college to get into and what's the easiest course? And the answer is they are all incredibly difficult. And unless you're prepared to put the hours in, just don't go near it. You will not do this on a wing and a prayer. And it's the same for every aspect of home education, right from Key Stage 2 up. You've got to get really behind it. If you want comparative results that they would have got from going to a top school. And the material you're working with, if they are hugely gifted, capable children, or children, say, in our case, who haven't got into good schools, it's all up to you. And it became our whole family lived and breathed the journey. So, and I'm sure clearly it's the same for you. You've done 11 GCSEs with one child.
Yeah, although
what do you think you deserve a medal?
Well, yeah, no, I really do. I got half a candle, so that's pretty good.
Got half a candle, you've done really well. I got invited to the top table at the Christ dinner as I was JCR president, and I sat there amongst all these parents on the top table next to the Lord Simon MacDonald of Salford, and I thought, this is the icing on the cake that I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would help us achieve it. I'm not taking all the credit. They worked incredibly hard too, but it was a massive team effort. And I'm really pleased to speak to you who sees it the same way, that doesn't just think, oh, weren't you lucky? And another people say, oh, they probably just took pity on you because you're home educated.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing to say, isn't it?
It is, but you get that, don't you? And then they got really good marks this year. They're waiting for because of the teacher strike, the lecturer strike. They're waiting for their grades from the summer exams, but they've had first in their run up. I thought, well, that's not because they're home educated. It sort of sounds like I'm really trying to prove a point, doesn't it? I'm not trying to prove a point, but you do get these people say, oh, they will have sympathy on you because you're home educated.
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. I think it perhaps it did 20 years ago or 15 years ago when it was more of an ideological choice and it was much rarer. But I think now because so many more people are pulling their children out of school because they're struggling with the school system, that there is now a sense that perhaps people who are home educating are ones that aren't able to keep up and aren't able to sort of like deal with the academics in school, even not fundamentally not really true. That's actually quite unusual for a child to be pulled out of school for academic reasons. Normally it's the kind of emotional onslaught of school, but there's no doubt that the whole community now is sort of like that there's a sensation of what home education is that wasn't there sort of 15 years ago.
Yeah, you all have seen it. I've seen it massively change in the last 5 years, and some of it is quite worrying because I think some parents come in, it's almost like a lamb to the slaughter. They think they're signing up for something, and it's probably a little bit of a different beast to what they think.
Yeah, I actually did a podcast with a new home educator who's my co-host, who's been doing it a year, about preconceptions of home education and then actually the reality of what home education is. But one thing I wanted to come back and mention is that this idea of collaboration, and that it's not enough just to be a pushy parent who decides, okay, my child is going to go to this university or do this, because I know for a fact from my perspective, I'm a pretty structured home educator, reasonably controlling in as much as I wanted to open as many doors as possible. My son turned around when he started doing his A-levels and he wanted to do history, physics maths and marine science, because he couldn't decide between doing physics or marine science at university. And I said, look, you really need to do further maths. And he really didn't want to do further maths. And he said, I just don't want to do it. I don't like maths that much. And it would really be unenjoyable for me. And I said, you are shutting a lot of doors if you don't do further maths. And he said, you know what, I'm okay to have those doors shut. I just don't want to do further maths because I will not enjoy the next 2 years of my life if I'm studying further maths. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. Like if that's the balance, that's okay.
It's interesting with Ernie going back to that, because he did further maths as an extra, but we didn't sit the exam. And he did say to me the other day, he's glad he's done it because he's now going to change to physics. And you do need it for physics and maths at university. So he was glad about that. But I absolutely agree. If they're really not enjoying it, then, and it's not for them, just, you're always shutting doors. I said to Ozzy when he dropped chemistry for GCSE, I did say, that means you will never be a doctor. You do realise that, don't you? And he said, I'm fine with that. I don't like blood anyway. I said, well, yeah, I don't think being a doctor is all about blood, but just bear with me. And then he said, well, I could probably go back to it when I'm older. So if I don't get into Cambridge when he's applying, I might go back. He said, later I'll go back and do my chemistry GCSE. And I said, well, that's a good thought, because he wanted to do chemistry and German if it went wrong. I said, well, that's really good, and you can always teach yourself later. But I'm not really in favour of saying to children, you can go back to this later, because as time goes by, all of us, we get onto this treadmill of life, and it's very hard to go back and do something that would have been easier and cheaper than doing it as an adult. But I think if somebody's really struggling with a subject, absolutely find another one that they enjoy. We can't all do everything. We can't all be a rocket scientist and a lawyer. We can't. Some people can, but most of us do have skills. You have to play to those, but you're constantly nudging at them. Just try this, because you may be better at it than you think. And one of the very interesting things about the way we did it, splitting GCSEs really does give you time to focus on the ones you do find harder, and in a relaxed way, cup of tea, piece of toast. We're now going to do maths, or we're going to do physics. We're going to do the one Ozzy found difficult.
And some of them, like history, unexpectedly take a lot longer than you would think, and others are very short.
I would have done it over and over again. My kids, for my birthday, bought me. We did medicine. Now, the first 3 for paper 1, I think you can do medicine, crime and punishment, and warfare. And we did medicine, and then they bought me the crime one as a birthday present. Thought it was an odd birthday present. It was really good, and I read it in a couple of days. I thought, yeah, I wish we'd done this one now. So they're lucky in a way that they had me. I was up for any of it. I was really, let's learn that. Let's try this. And always saying to them, you might find it difficult. You probably found it difficult at school, but home education is a very different environment. And, there's no teacher to be frightened of. There's no homework to give in. There's no other people there who you feel uncomfortable saying something in front of. You'll have a totally different perspective. But just remember, as a parent, it's really hard work.
Yeah, and I think that I if anyone listening, I'm hoping the one thing they've taken from this podcast is that it's parent heavy. If you want your child to really fly academically, you have to put in the hours as a parent, not just to help them out during their learning, but more importantly, to create that framework within which they can.
You're the manager of the whole thing. You are running a school effectively. So although by 14 only was self-teaching, I was still making sure he did the right thing. It was a case of, are you going to do ethics, cell biology, A, the salt is enough, or the B? Which one's best for you? Let me read through them, which suits your strengths. And I'm prepared to put those hours in, but a lot of people say, you must be joking. You're not going to read all of that. No, well, I did.
And I would say as well that even if you have tutors, my son has tutors for a couple of his A-levels, maths and physics. And even those, I double check the specifications. I make sure I know where he is. I'm mailing the tutor to say, is he up to date? What more do we need to do? Does he need to do any extra? You can't just sit back. And I think sometimes you see that people sort of think, I can just put them on Khan Academy, or I can just, sort of put them into an online, like a £2 tuition hub and settle back and my job is done. And that's absolutely fine if you're not really that fussed about what grades they get. But if you want A stars and 9s, you do need to be on it, don't you?
We do tend to find also on that point you just made, you do really need to have the tutor be on the wing there, because we've had instances where a tutor has merely taken a child through edX level history and then found there's the NEA element. And if you're part of an organisation like Tutors and Exams or one of the big providers, fine, you can enter, but you can't enter independently because of the NEA.
And the coursework, yep.
Yes, the coursework. And they'll come to us and say, can you mark it? And I say, I can give you guidance on what you've written, but we don't know if you've written it, so we can't give you a mark. You can't submit what we're giving. We don't know who's been involved in it. We don't know how authentic it is, and we will not put our name to something we don't know is authentic. And the same, even at low level, AQA, GCSE, English language, kids fall out of school in year 10 or year 11, and their parents who don't touch any of our groups, because the good thing with the home education groups you and I are on, people ask questions and get sensible answers mostly. But those who don't ask questions or don't know that it's even a question worth asking, the unknown unknowns, will merrily think they can do AQA English language from home, and then they can't because of the speaking element. And their tutor thinks they can too, because home education is such a minefield of what you can and you can't do.
We actually have we have a rule in Homeschooling UK where we actually don't allow any adverts for English language GCSE, just because it was so confusing. Because I know that you can, and some Tutors and Exams and but realistically we were getting tutors advertising for English language GCSE. And if you are one of these kind of parents who lurk in the group and maybe don't ask the questions, you see the adverts and you think, oh, okay, my child can sit that. And then we have to go on to every single post and say, well, you can, but it's difficult, and then the spoken bit will count as a fail, or at least it will look like a fail, and it's a time-consuming process.
It's a real nightmare. So what I'm saying is, not every tutor is fully conversant with what you can do as a home educating child, and the buck stops with you. Take ownership. You're in charge. You've chosen to do this. You might regret it. I didn't. I've absolutely loved it. But there's times you think, oh my God, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. So you're constantly having to read ahead, ask the right questions, read as much as you possibly can. And if somebody posts a question on Facebook, read all the comments so that you're a bit more informed, then do your own research.
Exactly. And then double check it yourself.
Double check. And, we had a few incidents this summer, I don't know if you read the post, where one person, I don't know how they came up with this, but they thought all their exams would be on the same day at the same centre. So they bought 2 hours away, stayed in the Premier Inn or something, and then realised they'd got to go back 9 times. There's another poor girl had got the old geography book, and she bought a second-hand book, and people saying, oh, that's fine, you'll be fine. I said, no, the case studies you've got were written in 2008. It's 15 years ago. Human geography changes a lot over 15 years, so you need the new book. It's just those sort of things. You're not asking the questions. There's a whole unknown thing out there. Yeah. So it's up to you to research. So I hope I've not put anybody off, because it's been a very rewarding journey, but it's hard work. It's fantastic, but put the hours in. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you just before we finish is about applying to European universities or global universities. I know that because of the tuition fee issue in England, that a lot of home educated students who are perhaps also, I know for a fact that my children have travelled a lot, and your children were brought up in France. And there is that sense, I think, amongst a lot of home educators that the world is smaller, because we've sort of lived in different countries, we've had that freedom. So what is the process if you want to apply to some of the top European or worldwide universities? Is it the same kind of approach?
To be honest, I don't know. I think you'd have to. The only time we did it, we looked at Paris, is it PSL for Aussie, and Strasbourg, but we didn't take it further than contacting the university, because with the whole Brexit issue, there were further complications and costs anyway. So we sort of put that to one side. My advice would be contact the university, and whatever they tell you, get it in writing. And I say that because another issue, but with science practicals for Ernie, even for Cambridge, one college told us we didn't need the practicals, and then later told us we did. And we did do them anyway, because I'd always said, I'm not going to fall down this trap, Ernie. We're going to have to do your science practicals. He was up for it anyhow. It's great. But I would write to each of the universities independently and ask them about their process. I don't believe there's a sort of UCAS process for the whole of Europe. I may be wrong, but it's something I'd again do your own research and really look into it and ask lots of questions and spend time online finding out whatever you can. And any webinars, you learn tons at those webinars. So and particularly Oxford and Cambridge are quite difficult because there isn't a sort of overall website for the university. Each college has its own website and they're all quite idiosyncratic. They've got a slightly different approach. So go on each one. You have to dig deep to find what's going on that you can join in, put your name down for. But like I say, Aussie will be doing more through my papers to try and help home educating kids applying for Oxbridge over the next year.
That would be great. And if when this podcast comes out, I always put a post up in our Home Education Matters Facebook group, and perhaps you could put a link there to the webinar that you mentioned and any blogs.
Far and wide, Eleanor, I'll share it far and wide for you.
You'll do what? Sorry, say that again.
I will share it far and wide. Now, I know more and more people are coming into home education. I do think they need to come into it with their eyes open, because I get people will say to me, "Oh, well, your kid's got better results than at school. It's obviously easy." So that's not the impression I want to give. And so I hope today, it's really worth it and go right through A levels to university. It's a fantastic journey, but you do need to put the time in to do it. And if you're working like I have been, it does take over your whole life.
So I know.
Be prepared.
I know that when my children were younger and we've home educated all the way through, and I look back on those days when they were sort of before their age, about 10, 11, as like the lovely halcyon golden days of home education, where we would just do kitchen experiments and read books. Yes, and of course you don't have to do any of this. I mean, you don't have to approach exams in this way. It's really only if you want to open the opportunity for your child to go to one of these top tier universities. Otherwise you can carry on just doing the kitchen experiments all the way through.
I look back and I think those times when we first started, although I was concerned about where it was all going to take us, it was a brilliant time to get to know the kids better. And I could see their learning styles were so completely different. How they would have survived to get, school would never have maximised the potential of either of them, because they're unbelievably different, but we managed to sort of begin to understand what worked best for both of them. So I'd say, enjoy those moments together. You will really know your kids and they will know you really well. And you're going in as, always approach it as a student, don't approach it as a teacher. You're there to learn with them. You can't be expected to know the entire GCSE curriculum, every subject. So be prepared to learn together.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when my son was learning maths and he was about 10 and he was learning functions, and and it was way beyond anything I had done at school. I was rubbish at maths anyway, and I basically said, look, I'll sit with you and we'll read. We were doing Life of Fred, the Life of Fred maths books, and I said, look, I'll sit with you and we can read the stories together, but you are now beyond me. I can't help you, so let's just sit together. And I asked him to explain functions to me, and it took so long, and he got and I just couldn't get it. And I said, you know what, you just when it comes to maths, you can just go and do it yourself. That's all good. Another
really good point, Eleanor, because your kids are not you. What they will be good at will be quite different to what you're good at. And I do meet a lot of home educators saying, I didn't like chemistry at school, so we're not going to do that. And I thought, well, yeah, but you're not them. They may be brilliant at it. And that it's interesting coming back as an adult. I didn't like maths at school, but I found actually, and doing it without a teacher looking over your shoulder thinking, oh my God, have I got that wrong? It was so much better. I thought, I'm getting it now. I'm understanding it. But I actually found it much easier going back to it than I did as a kid.
Yeah, and I often... You said about how all the different GCSE sort of specifications. I often think I could sit a GCSE in, well, I mean, between my children now, we've done 15 different GCSEs. I could easily sit 15 GCSEs now because I just know all of the different subjects.
You'll see how it all joins up as well, though, how they all fit and you think, yes, each career can come out of doing that. If I choose these, I can be this, I can do that, I can keep growing my interests. And you even see teachers, though, they all want to upend the whole curriculum and start again. And I think, no, if you've done it as a home educator where you're seeing like you and me, I saw 11 together, you saw 15, you have a very broad understanding of the whole thing and how it works. But if you go down that one road, so I'm an English teacher, I'm a maths teacher, and I've got a big problem with this or a big problem with that, you feel like you want to upend the whole system. It works if you approach it carefully and enjoyably without stress and pressure. It's fantastic. There's 230 schools, I think, 230 countries in the world following the UK curriculum. So other people do believe in it, including me.
Yep. So for anyone listening who wants to find out any more about exams, we have an episode all about sitting exams, mainly GCSEs. So this is about what subjects to choose, when to sit them, how to sit them, approaching exam centres, choosing your exam board. We've got a podcast all on that. So if you look back in the files, you'll find that in whatever streaming service you're listening to this on. And we've also got, for those of you that has a child that just wants to get through GCSEs and doesn't want necessarily to get a large amount or to go to Oxbridge, we also have an exam hacks podcast, which is very helpful and just a sort of like, if you want to, if your child is basically just come out of school at 15 and you're scraping your way through the system, that's also a really helpful episode. So we've now got 3 episodes on exams, and they're all coming at it from a very different approach. One is very much about the logistics of it. That is an episode with Iram Malik. And then we have an episode with Chitana Greenwood, which is about exam hacks and pretty much sort of the easiest route to get through GCSEs for those of you whose child really is reticent. And then now today with Emma White, looking at how to get into these really top tier universities and how to structure your time and your home education journey to allow your child to have as many opportunities as possible later in life. So Emma, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure talking. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.